Ladies and gentlemen, playing music is hard. Studying music is maybe even harder. But starting to study an Adagio from the time of Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven is even harder than that. Maybe it's the hardest of all. Because in these pieces you have so many notations, so many note values. The score seems to be like a jungle, like a gigantic puzzle that seems to be at first unsolvable. Today, I'm going to take you to a Mozart variation set, like the variations on Je suis l'Indor, which is a fantastic piece. It's the variation series that comes just before the famous À vous dirige maman. In that set of variations, Mozart had a fantastic Adagio, which is a really difficult one. I recorded that piece recently, in fact last week, for my recording project on Mozart Keyboard Works. I struggled with it as well. I think I solved the puzzle. I'm going to share that with you. Before we do that, allow me to just point you to next Monday, 15th of June, we'll have a new Kickstarter, and it's a very special one. We're going to launch a recording that many of you may not expect, the Schule der Geläufigkeit, the School of Velocity, by Czerny, recorded on this piano by me. And now, before you say that this recording of these pieces are not worth recording, they are, but there's much more than that. The title of the project is also a little bit, not a mystery. I'm going to explain everything in the introduction video on Kickstarter. Double it. For those of you who are insiders in our temporary construction project, you will know what this title means in the first place, but it has a double meaning. So everything in this project is about doubling it. It's fantastic, the music is fantastic, Czerny is fantastic, he deserves so much more credit. And playing these pieces in whole beat, these pieces become pedagogical like jewels. You see why Czerny was a leading pedagogue on piano in whole Europe and maybe the entire world in the 19th century. That's coming up. There's a link in the description box. If this video goes live, hopefully also the pre-launch of that Kickstarter is already live. If it isn't, then check later. You get notifications through Kickstarter if you backed one of our earlier projects, or through our email list. So our newsletter, also a link in the description box. Okay. Now let's go to Je suis l'Indor. So the variations are beautiful. They're very long. I mean, they're even longer than the À vous dirige maman, and it's kind of twin set. So just a beginning for you to orientate what kind of music we're talking about. It's this tune. And that obviously continues. First variation, second variation. You have quite cool effects here. I'm not going to stand still too long because we are going to the Adagio, but just for you to listen, like the imitation of instruments. Here, for instance, in the second variation, you have a kind of bassoon imitation. Beautiful. And so on and so on. Then beautiful variation here as well. I mean, the variations the way Mozart is using the patterns of variations is just mind-blowing. Only variation 3 here. Can talk about notation here. I'm not going to do that because it's not the goal of this video. We're going to move further. Also here, like again, the bassoon comes back. I mean, how cool of an effect is that? Very virtuosic variation even. 30-second notes. And so on, and so on, and so on. Minuet tempo with a kind of like section, capricci, like improvisation section that goes to a beautiful, it's not written as in andante or adagio, but it's clearly another notation, so I'm taking actually another tempo there, but it's beautiful. It's not this adagio that I mean, we're going to have another one. And now this. And then this is also nice. Yeah, what can I say here? And that is an ostinato, like treble. He repeats that in the bass. And then we arrive at the Adagio. Now let's have a look at the Adagio together. So when you see a score like this, when I see a score like that, it's not just you, it's like for every musician, regardless of your experience and how long you play and how professional you are, doesn't matter. This is difficult because look at what note values you have. You have at the beginning 30-second notes, then you have like a quarter note in the left hand, a long trill then in the right hand, 16th notes with staccato indication. How often do you see that? We're going to talk about tempo indicators in a second. When you have 30-second notes, you have 64th notes here, a lot of them even, but it's not the end. Like here you have, if I'm not mistaken, 128th notes, and then he goes even further here. What is that, 256th notes? For those of you who like me to say every note value in the English language, like the British system, I am not capable of. I have to look up every time if it's a quaver, it's an eighth note or whatever. This is closest to my mother tongue, like I'm sorry for that, but you get my point. The variety of note values in this piece is so big, and so what do you do? Where do you start? Look at this. And the point is that what I see many people do is say, okay, we have a 2/4 time signature. When I was in piano class in Amsterdam, my first teacher there said like 2/4 is quarter note. Yeah, you have to feel the quarter note pulse, right? How are you doing this? If you look at this bar here at the bottom, good luck feeling the quarter note pulses there, because how can you do that? And of course, what many musicians do these days is like they just slow down here. Now, you can do that if you want to do that, but historically, in that time and much later throughout the 19th century, this was a typical piece where you have a tempo and you stick to that tempo, and all the note values are like little pieces of the puzzle that fit into that timeline. And so you have to figure out what timeline you are dealing with. Now, if we look at the beginning, because we shouldn't forget that much of this music was meant to be sight read, in that time especially. Not saying that this is like particularly suitable for that, but Mozart gives a hint. You start with the 32nd note. So a 32nd note in a quarter note pulse is very difficult, because there is no handle there to say, okay, when do I give my 32nd note and what's the real relationship to that? So when you see that at the beginning of a piece, then you can be sure that the composer was not thinking in quarter notes. And in fact, 2/4 is a time signature that oftentimes is used as 4/8. But here we go further, because the notation actually suggests that Mozart had even a further subdivision of time in his mind. His father wrote a beautiful book on how to play the violin. And he writes in that book that every composition has a spot where the player can figure out what tempo the composer had in mind. And it's the reverse of what many of us today think. We go to the time signature, we think in quarter notes, and we try to fit all the notes into what tempo we have at the beginning in our mind. But you have to reverse the process. You have to look for those spots, and in this piece there is one. We're gonna see that in a second, where you start from there and you say like, okay, when the composer writes this, I can be sure that the timeline, his tempo that he had in mind, allowed this passage or this fragment to be played in that tempo. So let's start from there and reconstruct everything backwards. And that's what we're gonna do. So if we go to the fastest note values, they are here. Those 256 notes, say that in British language. I have no idea what that would be. Leave it in the comment. I mean, I like reading these British note value names because they're beautiful. But anyways, so you have there a very fast figure. So if I start playing from here, and then this jump right to this B flat chord. And so today, what you would learn in music class, but especially in conservatory, is like, okay, how do we figure out this technical difficulty? Well, this is difficult, but what I mean is like, regardless of what we can play, how do we overcome that? How do we mask the fact that we are not able, if we play it much faster? I mean, how are you going to do that? So there are a lot of tricks, like a little bit of ritenuto, or like this note comes much too late, or whatever. But what happens if we start from there and we say, what is the fastest we can play this in? Because it's an adagio, but an adagio doesn't mean no virtuosity. And virtuosity is like a term that you have to contextualize. Virtuosity in Mozart's time is not the same as virtuosity today. But anyways, that's another discussion. So what is the kind of natural limit? And that's for all of us different. But there is a limit for all of us here. So clavichord is especially difficult because you have to still make sound. You cannot just throw your fingers in the key because the instrument will not sound. That's definitely one of them. That's like the upper limit of the tempo. So if I play then, if we take this pulse, da 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 dum, ya da 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 dum, ya da 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 dum. I'm counting now. Dum, dum, ya da 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 dum. Those are 30-second notes, not even 16. So we have a pulse in 30-second notes, which is the fastest as we now. Today, this morning, Wednesday morning, actually figure out that's the fastest that I can play right now, without preparation, without warming up my fingers, or whatever. So if I play the whole line, ja da 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 dum bum. So the pulse is. That's possible. So, okay, we go from there. Of course, all these notes you have to figure out, like where do they come? Where do I start playing them? How do they actually fall together with the left hand? That's if you struggle with that. I mean, don't feel bad. This is a kind of very unusual notation. Like if you, for Mozart was the same. Remember, a long time ago I made a video about the famous competition, so to say, between Clementi, the other composer, and Mozart. It was like a shock for Mozart hearing Clementi at that Christmas Eve, I think, in the royal and the emperor's castle. It was like the emperor was inviting both of the musicians and compared them with each other. And Mozart wrote to his father, it was not fair competition because Clementi got to play the fast movements and I had to play the slow movements. which were difficult, which were more difficult than the fast movements. This is why. And so when we take this tempo to the beginning, then we have something very strange, like with dum, that's a pulse. We had dum, 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 dum. So this is the 30-second note. Now we can play the 30-second note right in time. Dum, bum, 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 dum. But what many people will do then is just play it like this. But that's not what it is. Because we have a quarter note here. And if we have this pulse like dum, 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 we have to play 8 pulses here and 2 on every 16th note. And that is what makes it so difficult, and also difficult for many musicians today who think like we have to start from the quarter note and now we're going to think in 30-second notes. Can you imagine that? So this is a very long trill then. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, ti-tam, bum, dum, bum, bum. And then people say like, but that doesn't work. The point is, you don't have another choice, because you still have these 256 whatever notes there that you must play them. And now you can say like, yeah, Wim, that's kind of dogmatic, because I mean, let's figure out a little bit here and then we can play it a little faster at the beginning. The point is, why would you want to do that? If you think like that, go to your brain and say like, hey, up there, you don't have more musical fantasy than that? Because if Mozart really had this in mind, probably the effect would be stunning when we do it right. And the beginning is actually a kind of beautiful start of an incredible piece where Mozart just sets the scene and gives the possibility to the player to play this long trill. It's kind of displaying kind of virtuosity. I mean, it's not easy. And then he's building up the atmosphere of the piece, and listen how beautiful that works. So I'm just taking the same pulse as we just figured out. The piece is not studied yet. We cannot play it. I mean, it will take a while before we actually know and internalize all these different rhythms and do not doubt anymore. Like with the 64th note and 128 notes, it's so unnatural that you have to really study it a lot. And I mean by a lot, like multiple days in a row, and then you internalize everything. But listen to the effect at the beginning. And now, it's so beautiful. And now you understand why he has bows there. Dum, bum, bum, ta-rum, bum. So sweet, actually. How cool is that? How beautiful is that? And now we are playing in, you could say, in 16th note pulse, because if we take the 30-second notes, I mean, it's up to you what you would like the best. The 30-second notes are easiest to follow. If you play it along with the metronome, then I think for tempo that I had for the recording, because there's no historic tempo indication, you know, metronome, I had 16th equals 92, which is of course 8th note, 30-second note 92 and single beat. If you're a little bit confused, it's the first video here. We have videos on single beat, whole beat. We take the back and forth of the metronome. And so this is a beautiful setup of the Adagio in which all of the notes fit. I don't have to do anything strange, anything like that's not in the score. And we are still here in Mozart's time, so not everything is in the score. But Beethoven is already much different. Chopin's, of course, everything is there in the score, I would say. People oftentimes too easy say like, not everything is in the score. Yeah, but try to understand what was for these people naturally in the score or not. And here, there is, in that time, the left hand just sticks to the tempo. And then you create this beautiful flow of movement above which all of these different note patterns actually evolve, and then everything is naturally there. And here, the prima donna. Unbelievable. Here, just transposing this to the higher range of the keyboard. This is what Mozart makes a genius. Let's see if everything fits for the rest. Also here, like, you have here this beautiful figure here. And so, like, you have an articulation necessary because after the F, because that's the end of the bow, and typically, I mean, why would you have a bow? The bow ends and that note is shorter, and then the next note has even a staccato dot. That's a 30-second note with the staccato dot. So that doesn't make any sense because in a faster tempo, I mean, because you have this repeated note. So repeated note naturally, automatically, by default, I mean, it's necessary to make it shorter because otherwise you cannot repeat the note, right? And in spite of that knowledge, in spite of that fact, Mozart writes a dot on it. So that gives you like immediately, and you have to learn to see that those are patterns that you see in the score. That is how you read the score. Why would the composer give a dot, a staccato note, a staccato dot on a note that is already repeated and is on top of that a 30-second note? So we are not in a quarter note. That means nothing. We are in a 30-second note pulse here, and then in that tempo. Makes perfect sense. Now we're going to build up of the passage we just discussed. And I have to keep my left hand steady, because you as a listener have the right to just like, you are in this pulse and you want to stick there. Because if you change that pulse, we are so used to doing that because all musicians do that, just a little bit of fluctuation. Schumann called this like the intoxicated virtuoso for virtuosic playing. But listen, just tempo, steady tempo. I was even messing up here. I have to practice that. I'm on the limit now. Eh? This is a passage that's certainly on the clavichord I need to practice, but this is the maximum. And then you go further and then you get actually a kind of change of rhythm. There you have to count by 8 notes. Like he's accelerating in fact with the 6 tuplets. And now, beautiful. People would say like the music falls flat here, the music falls still, like you don't have a flow anymore. But why would you need that flow? you had all these fast notes where you can do whatever you want. You can give accents, you can give it, like, make it more dramatic. If you want to do that, fine. It's more operatic. If you want to play it more like Baroque or in one line. There's kind of mystery there. We still are in that same pulse that allows us, I mean, if we practice, to play this. And then you have this moment of reflection, and again, like, that's just beautiful. Why does music always have to have this pulse forward, this move, this urge to go forward? No. And by the way, this is a molto adagio. Molto adagio cantabile. I mean, you cannot go much slower. And on top of that, all these fast notes. That's why adagios are the most incredible things to play, but difficult to study. So again, here, like, you fall, like, not flat, but you have to make something of that and embrace this quiet part. And don't try to do something to go further. No. Just let it drop. Like, you have the heavy beat and the slow and the weak beat, like tom, and then you set the floor to this. Staccato notes here, beautiful. Mozart is so precise. Here, he ends the bow here and then tam ta ram pam. He is, of course, an opera writer. Yeah, that is like, you have to really think of someone like as a prima donna on stage here, eh? So, and this is, of course, also beautiful on the clavichord. Here. Still, tom, tom, pom. So I also don't have to do anything strange here, because also that are, what kind of note value is that? I have no idea. It's 128, I think. So. And also here. Strange effect here. This is also a very important passage at the very end of the Adagio. So you have a trill on the 16th note, and then you have a staccato dot on the 16th note, and then you have, what is that? 128th notes with staccato dots and a bow on top of that. I mean, how much more evidence do you need, in the words of Leopold Mozart, his father, that these are the spots that actually give you a window on what the composer had in mind as timeline. The tempo is timeline, and the faster you play, the more you compress the notes and everything, and it still needs to fit on that. So you must find that ideal tempo, that ideal timeline. Therefore, tempo reconstruction is important, and it's never done. I mean, people don't look at these historical indications they look at it, but I mean, it's ridiculous, of course, in single beat. you will know that. And here is an example of that. So a 16th note with a trill. You could say like, okay, yeah, whatever. That's not exceptional. No, it isn't. But it is difficult if you play it much faster, and you still have to give it like a kind of meaning. You arrive here. And this is so natural. And then it's just the opening theme that is repeated, and then the variation actually closes. So if you are able to manage to figure out a puzzle like this, you can figure out everything. There are not much more complex variations than this. Mozart has written several others that are in the same range, but it's the same principle also when you go to Beethoven sonatas. This will happen often, maybe a little bit less in this kind of style, but still the principles are the same. This is kind of bel canto ornamentation where composers are imitating like singers on stage. Take this to Chopin. You do the same thing. Like you have a Chopin nocturne with like these long lines, and then we made a video also on the preludes, the last prelude, the D minor, where you have also these long line of bel canto. What do pianists do? They just stop to give the right hand time to finish like the chain of notes. But that's not what Chopin had in mind. Your left hand stays stable. It's the same principle as here. So when you manage to decipher this, then you are good to go for 100 years more of literature. And of course, when you then go to a normal Allegro, I mean, come on, that's simple stuff. Although, in the Allegro, you will not find spots like our famous 256th note passage here, or fragment. That is like putting like a ceiling on what is possible. Much faster than this doesn't make any sense if you want to honor the score in this sense. But of course, with an Allegro, you still have those, but they're a little bit more hidden. But that's for another time. So after this video, just go to your piano, your clavichord, your harpsichord, your digital piano, whatever, and try to decipher that. I'm not saying for all of you like play it. I'm aware that this is still difficult stuff, also to read the notes, but it's just, you will learn so much by doing it. And then you can come back to this video and just compare with the fragments I played, or you can just wait for the recording to be released. That will be for October, early November. Again, link in the description to our newsletter. I'll inform you there when things are happening. And don't forget to check out our Kickstarter. Czerny deserves your time, deserves your attention. I'm sure you're gonna love him after listening to the recording. I'm super thrilled and a little bit nervous as well, because I know it's like a little bit of a stretch. We are going against a lot of biases against Czerny. Is it worth a CD recording? Is it worth like for you to download everything on Bandcamp? It is worth that. And of course, it's the context around that actually it's so symbolic for our project. There's no better way to support that research towards historical tempos than just support the Kickstarter. It's really, and then we have the double awareness factor, where we will have packages for you to support that we will send to conservatories directly to students, and that's like mind-blowing. Still, I think it's such a great idea, I think, and I can say it because I didn't develop it on my own. So we have a few people working on this. Anyways, hope this was informative for you, and I will definitely do more of these, like deep dives in notation, how to start studying a score, how to practice, because that's a thing that I know many of you struggle with, as I do, as everyone does. We're all the same. Again, that's all I've got for you today. Thank you for watching, and we will see each other very soon again. Bye.